Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over Tropical Depression Ida, which right now is somewhere over the lower Tennessee Valley, and that'll eventually be moving up into the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. We're going to be going over how much rainfall you should be expecting with the storm and timing out this heavy rainfall as it moves across the Tennessee Valley, the central Appalachians, and then eventually into the coastal Northeast. Let's get right into it here, and let's start off with your weather photo of the day. Again, if you want to send in any of your weather photos, send them over to this email address on the bottom right hand part of your screen. This was sent in by Max. He took a sunset picture yesterday in southern Worcester County, Massachusetts, and that was around 7:30. You can see the sun kind of glaring out in the background behind all those trees. So it's a great photo. Thank you for sending it over. And again, if you have any photos that you want to send in, send it over to that email address in the bottom right hand part of the screen, and also it's in the description of the video as well. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have some air quality alerts and red flag warnings in the gray, and also in that pink color for much of the West. We have some flood watches in effect for parts of California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. And then we have some more flood watches, which is what we're mainly going to be talking about for today, over a good portion of Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, a little bit of South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, D.C., Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. So that's where we have those flood watches up. I would not be surprised if maybe they extend that up into some parts of coastal, central, and northern New England. So I would not be surprised if, let's say, coastal Maine or coastal New Hampshire gets a flood watch put up, because it looks like some of the rainfall could move up there. Maybe we could get a 1 or 2 inch amount of rainfall in that area. Looking at the high temperature yesterday, it was at Death Valley, California. They got up to 120 degrees. Low temperature of 24 in Peter Sinks, Utah. Highest rainfall report was in Hancock County, Mississippi, where they got 10.11 inches of rainfall, and there were no snowfall reports yesterday. Here's a look at the National Hurricane Center page, and we're going to break down these storms individually, but starting off with Invest 90L, which is in the eastern Atlantic. This one is very likely to develop, has a 90% chance within the next 2 days and within the next 5 days. We then have a Tropical Depression Kate, which we'll go into more depth with, but that one's expected to pretty much just kind of maneuver somewhere like this out into the open sea. So we're not expecting any landfall impact, whether that be over Bermuda or even into the Azores. We're not expecting really anything for that area. Disturbance 2, that's out in the lower Caribbean, where we have a 20% chance of developing within the next 5 days. And then we have ex-tropical storm Ida, which is over there over southern Tennessee, and that's going to be moving its way further to the northeast, and that's going to be the main topic of today's video. Here's a look at Tropical Depression Kate. It's located at 23.5 degrees north by 50.8 degrees west. Maximum winds of 35 miles per hour. Minimum pressure 1,007 millibars. Moving north at about 5 miles per hour. You can see Bermuda's right up here, and you can see that this is expected to stay to its east. So even though it does make a little bit of a curve to the west, we're still expecting this to stay to the east. No land impacts are expected from the storm, but it does tick off another name off of the hurricane list. So we're getting higher up there in terms of the total amount of storms that we have. I believe we're at 11 or 12 for the season so far. So we'll see. Maybe we can even get to 20 by the end of September, especially if they start naming all of these tiny storms like what we saw with Kate. And I believe Julian also was a very, very tiny storm out in the northern Atlantic, which they also named as a storm. So if they keep on naming these tiny storms, we're pretty easily going to surpass that 20 storm mark, although we haven't seen too many big storms other than Ida impact these areas. So we've had a couple of big impact storms, but the majority of these storms so far this season have been of a weaker variety. Here's a look at Invest 90L, that's out in the eastern Atlantic, located at 10.4 degrees north by 18.6 degrees west, maximum winds of 35 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,006 millibars, and we don't know how fast it's moving as of right now. Yesterday, it was just on land of the Western Africa coast. Now we're looking at this offshore, and it's over here right now. You can see it's mainly a big cluster of storminess and convective activity. We'll have to see if you can get any sort of rotation here or any sort of defined element to the storm. And if that does happen, then you're pretty easily going to be able to name this as another tropical storm. And whether this even impacts land is unknown as of right now. We're expecting this to head further to the west, but of course, most of these storms end up curving out to the north before they hit the Caribbean. A few of them do, however, slide over to the south and start to move into the Caribbean. So we still have to pay our attention to this one, although as of right now, it's off to sea. Over the next 3 or 4 days, it's going to stay out to sea, and we'll have to see what happens with this. It could, of course, become our next big storm that we have to pay attention to. Here's a look at Tropical Depression Ida, and I should actually say it's ex-tropical storm Ida technically right now. So right now it doesn't have any tropical status. Again, you can see the rotation around southern Tennessee. There isn't really many tropical elements to the storm left, and that's the reason why it's ex-tropical storm Ida now. You can see that it's mainly just a big cluster of rainfall. Here's where you're seeing the rainfall. And something that's really interesting on the satellite, you can even tell where the rainfall is. So you can see here, this is mainly just cloudiness, but you're not actually dealing with too much rainfall. And you can see there's not that much bumps. There are not that many bumps in the clouds here, and that's usually a sign of rainfall if there is bumps. And you can see some of that some of the bumps over parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, even into parts of Georgia and North Carolina. So that's where you're dealing with the rainfall. And then where it kind of smooths out on the radar is where you're not dealing with the rainfall. That's where it's mostly just thick cloudiness. So an interesting thing that you can point out on the satellite, and that's, you don't even have to look at the radar or the Doppler radar to figure out where the rainfall is. It's mainly being constrained to southern Kentucky as of right now, but that's going to continue to spiral on to the northeast. Located at 35 degrees north by 87.8 degrees west, maximum winds of about 30 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 996 millibars, so it's still fairly strong, moving northeast at 15 miles per hour, so it's moving fairly quickly as of right now. If we look at the forecasted radar here, so you can see this is as of about right now. So this is if you opened your radar app, or if you were to look at the Doppler radar right now, this is something similar to what you would see. And again, that matches up with the satellite, where most of that rainfall is south of central Kentucky. You see a few scattered showers, very light, into parts of West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, but most of this rainfall is still in the Tennessee Valley, and that's going to continue to spiral on to the northeast. So this would be by 12 p.m. Today Eastern Time, which is right around when I'm recording this. That would be 11 a.m. Central Time. If we move this on to 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, you can see not a lot has changed, but you are starting to see some of that rainfall now dip into West Virginia, Ohio, even the southernmost part of Indiana. It's going to quickly move up to the northeast. So now by later tonight, so we're looking at somewhere around 5 or 6 p.m., that rainfall is now going to start to fill in on the east side of the Appalachians. So now you're dealing with some areas, let's say in northern Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and even some scattered showers into Pennsylvania and New Jersey starting to pop up on the map. So you're now starting to see clearing of the skies into areas like Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Meanwhile, areas further north and east of there are now starting to get into that rainfall. If we move this on even more, you're going to see that by 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which would be 8 p.m. Central Time, tonight, you can see that we have some of that rainfall, steady rainfall, into parts of Ohio, West Virginia, Northern Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, even into parts of Delaware, where it's now starting to fill in a little bit. You still have some residual rain into the southern Appalachians, but that is clearing out by this point, and it's mostly just steady, moderate rainfall for most of these spots. So you're not dealing with anything too substantial. If we move this on even further, you can see how now it's going to start to stall out. So it's going to kind of speed up. At first, once it was down into Louisiana, it was much slower. Then it started to curve up into Mississippi, and now it's in Tennessee. So it's fairly quick moving storm up to that point. But it looks like this is going to start to kind of slow down as it heads into areas like like eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. So that will help with the flooding, or it will actually be worse for the flooding. It'll lead to more flooding probably because that rainfall is going to be sticking over that area for a longer amount of time. We're also going to notice that you're going to see some more convective bands reach out from right here and start to move further to the northeast. And this is where the bulk of that flooding, especially over areas like Pennsylvania, is going to take place. So you see this entire storm shifting off further to the east. This would be by tomorrow around 3 a.m. Eastern time, which would be 2 a.m. Central time. And you can see that we have steady rainfall over this entire area that extends from western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee all the way to the border of New York with Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So you can see that's where most of that rainfall is by that point. So this would be early tomorrow morning. Moving this on to a little bit later in the morning, so around 6 a.m. Eastern time, we're dealing with still that rainfall along the majority of these southern and central Appalachians, but now starting to move into the coastal northeast as well. So areas like eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, parts of New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts are now starting to get in on some of that rainfall that continues to pull away further to the northeast. And here's the convective banding that I was talking about. You're now starting to see some of these yellows and oranges pop up on your screen, and you're going to notice that, especially when we look at the total rainfall maps from these models, that the heaviest rainfall is forecast to be over this area right here. So this is where we're looking at potentially the threat of seeing 5 or more inches of rainfall over a fairly expansive and widespread area. Moving this into the northeast view so you can see most of the storm a little bit better. This would be by 12 p.m. Eastern time. We still have this storm rolling on through the northeast, so a lot of these areas are still dealing with steady rainfall, with the exception of Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia, where they're dealing with steady to heavy rainfall at times. Moving this on, you can see that cluster of yellow and orange moving along further to the east, but it's moving very slowly. So this is where most of that flooding is going to come for central and eastern Pennsylvania, where you're dealing with that heavy rainfall. Also, if you live in the panhandle of West Virginia or Maryland, and also into a little bit of northern Virginia, that's also an area that you want to watch out for the rainfall. Even if you're not in that intense band of rainfall, the fact that some of these areas in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts are going to be dealing with rainfall for that extended amount of time, even if it's just steady or light rainfall, may cause some adding up of totals. So you're dealing with probably 2 or 3 inches in most spots, locally 4 or 5 inches of rainfall. Moving this on, you can now see that this area of heavy rainfall is actually strengthening a little bit, and we may even be dealing with a few thunderstorms, especially on the southern end of the storm. So a bit of convective activity into Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, definitely not out of the question as of right now. Moving this on, you can see this very heavy area of rainfall is slowly pushing on to the east, so you can probably get a good inch of rainfall within just about 2 hours from this area of rainfall, and that's going to continue to plow on further to the east. So if you get hit into that area, that probably I would say 25 or 50 mile wide area of heavy rainfall, you could definitely deal with a little bit of flash flooding, especially with how heavy that rainfall is. You can see that by later on Wednesday, so later tomorrow night into Thursday morning, you can see that we have some of that heavy rainfall now pushing into parts of eastern Pennsylvania, northern and central New Jersey, Long Island, southern upstate New York, into parts of southern Connecticut by that point. Moving this on a little bit more, that heavy rainfall lasts for maybe 3 or 4 hours at a time and then moves on to the next spot. So now the heaviest rainfall into southern New England, still into parts of New York as well. And then you still have that residual rainfall, the lighter but still impactful rainfall into parts of central and coastal New England. So areas like Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts dealing with some of that rainfall. Then that heavy area of rainfall, the orange, the red, starts to push on into Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, eastern Long Island, and then you're dealing with eventually that moving into coastal Massachusetts and New Hampshire with that heavy rainfall. And this is when most of your rainfall is going to come if you live within this area of coastal New England. So that's a general idea of when we should be expecting most of that rainfall. You can see it's wrapping up by Thursday morning into Maine, which is the only real state that's dealing with a majority of their area being covered with rainfall. If we move this on a little bit more, you can see that eventually moves out to the east into Atlantic Canada. and it's eventually out of sight as we move into right around 6 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. If we look at the total rainfall, you can see that in those green colors, that's where we're looking at a tenth of an inch to half an inch of rainfall, half an inch to an inch in the blue, 1 to 2 inches in the yellows, 2 to 3 in the red, 3 to about 4 inches in that kind of brownish or whitish color, and then we have 4 to 6 inches in this purple color, which you see right in here. So this is an example of that purple color, and then in the pink color, which you see in parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, even into parts of Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island. That's where we're dealing with 6+ inches of rainfall, even as much as 10 inches in those areas. So you can see this heavy band of rainfall where we're dealing with about 4 or more inches in this kind of purple or pink area. And this is where we're dealing with the majority of that rainfall. The areas around there is going to have a sharp cutoff between seeing maybe 4 inches, 5 inches of rainfall to maybe just an inch or even less. So you can see that most notably in parts of Pennsylvania. So you can see that, let's say if you live right in central Pennsylvania, you're dealing with probably 6 or 7 or even 8 inches of rainfall. You go up into northern Pennsylvania, even into an area like Erie, Pennsylvania, up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and you're dealing with barely any rainfall. So there's going to be a big differential. This almost reminds me of these winter storms where there's a big difference between just a small area between the amount of snowfall. So this is something like that, except in the form of rainfall. And of course, this is going to be rather impactful. One of the ways that you can get people to kind of understand how much a certain amount of rainfall is by converting that into snowfall. A lot of people don't really understand how much 6 inches of rainfall can actually be. That can flood an entire town, especially if you don't have good drainage within the area, or if you're close to small stream rivers that often flood. 6 inches of rainfall, if we were to convert that over to snowfall, and of course, in the winter time, you would not have as much moisture in the atmosphere, so this would never happen. But that would be closer to 50 or 60 inches of snowfall. So not necessarily the same or not necessarily equivalent, but it can show you that that amount of water can do some damage. So you want to prepare for this. You don't want to, of course, take extreme precautions, but you do want to at least prepare, especially if you know that your area often floods in these type of scenarios. When you're dumping 4 to 6 or even more inches of rainfall over a fairly wide area that goes from Massachusetts all the way to West Virginia, that is definitely going to cause some issues, especially on the roadways, on some of the highways. That could cause some issues as well. If you look at the Weather Prediction Center's forecast, they have this a little bit further to the south, so you can see that they have the 4+ inch area right in here. But still, either way, most of these areas are getting at least 3 to 4 inches. And then you even have that tiny pocket in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia where you're looking at maybe 5 or 6 inches of rainfall. So you want to at least prepare for this. Again, you don't have to take extreme precautions for this, but at least be wary of what's happening outside. Turn on your local news channel just to see any weather reports on, or if there is any updates with the weather, especially in your area. And then, of course, if you have any messages from your local officials saying to evacuate for any reason, especially for flooding, then you definitely want to heed that, because again, small stream river flooding can definitely be dangerous, and there's a lot of areas that regularly experience that, and it can cause damage to things like cars or your property. So we want to definitely pay attention to this flooding. And then if you even look at the chances of flash flooding, you're looking at about a 20 to 50% chance, and that spans from the Tennessee Valley all the way up into the central Appalachians, mid-Atlantic, and then also into the coastal Northeast. So a very wide area where we're expecting 20 to 50% chance of flash flooding. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.